Apartheid in South Africa. And my first guest is Mr. RTurner, an apartheid activist and a graduate of Tennessee State University. And let me welcome you to Black Pulse, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. Glad to be here.
Generally, when we think of the continent of Africa, Mr. Turner, we generally think of a black continent. And in order to give us some perspective in terms of apartheid in South Africa, why don't you give us some geographical information about South Africa and about the continent of Africa?
I'm glad that you asked that. On one of the recent programs on another station, there was some discussion about people in this country not really knowing about the different areas that many of the politicians that are running for office are talking about. So I think in light of the fact that we're talking about a particular area in Africa, South Africa in particular, that we get some background on the continent itself. The continent of Africa is 11.5 million square miles. In relationship to the United States, that is 3 times the size of the United States. It has a population of over 450 million people compared to a population of 240 million people here in the United States.
Now, this is South Africa as the continent
This is the continent of Africa as a whole. The continent has 52 nation states, like similar to the states that you have here in the United States. You might want to refer to them as being nation states because they are independent nations. The continent of Africa, the country that has the largest population in Africa is Nigeria, which has over 100 million people. So you can see that given that one nation has perhaps 1/3 of the total population of Africa, you said one of the problems in Africa is that it is underpopulated as a result of the slave trade and other things that has transpired over the course of years. When we look at the country of South Africa in relationship to the country, the continent itself, we know that it has a geography size of 433,678 square miles. Now, for those who don't understand that in relationship to the mileage, that is 10 times the size of the state of Tennessee.
So South Africa itself, in which we are dealing with apartheid, is 10 times.
10 times the size of the state
so
of
it's
Tennessee.
A very large country.
Very large country. It's 5 times the size of Britain. The population, as you've indicated in your opening remarks, is 26 million, at least the African population, 26 million. The estimated population of the Europeans that are there is around 5 million. The estimated population of Asians, perhaps around 2 or 3 million, and of colors, maybe around 1 million. So this gives us the parameters in which we're talking about in terms of geography. Also, when we talk about Africa, people like to see it as just a one nation. And those nation states, those 52 nation states, have not always been that way. There was something that's transpired in the history of the continent in order for those divisions to take place. I was having a conversation with one of my students on the campus of Tennessee State University, and he was asking me the question, well, why do the different brothers and sisters that come to school here speak the different languages of English and French and of Portuguese? And I want to explain to him that there was a period of the colonial period in Africa in which the different European countries had at a certain period in time began to come into the country and divide it up. There's a very important conference that took place in 1884 and 1885 that political scientists refer to as the Berlin Conference. What had taken place was that Leopold Senghor of Belgium had decided that he wanted a particular part of the Congo and had claimed this particular part of the Congo as his own domain. And there were other European countries who also were claiming certain sections of the same area that he had claimed. So he entered into an alliance with 3 other nations. I think it was might have been Germany, France, and the United States. And with this power base, he was able to say, well, because I have this relationship with these other 3 countries, this, therefore, it is mine.
So by the 1890s, Africa would be partitioned among several of the European countries, with the United States even involved. Now, what about the various racial groups that we're talking about? Remember, we talked about blacks and
Asians,
coloreds and et cetera. Explain that. I mean, what's the situation?
Well, specifically in South Africa, the Dutch were the first ones to reach there in 1652. The Hottentot were farmers, and they were also herders, which means that there were nomadic groups in them in terms of traveling. So when the Dutch had settled there, there were no African people in that area at that particular time. This was considered to be a refreshment station for other sailors who were on their route to India and East.
Now, this would be the present-day South Africa in which the Dutch have now settled.
Right.
Very good.
Right. In relationship to the question you asked about the different groupings that exist there, some people refer to them as different racial groupings, but that is not correct because there's no such thing as different races as you have dogs and cats, etc. What you have are different ethnic groups who happen to be in South Africa at the same time, and just because of their complexion or the amount of melanin they have in their skin, they have been given certain class status in South Africa. For example, the reason why the Asians or Indians are there, in particular because there was a need for labor for the sugar plantations that had been developed by the farmers, who are referred to as Afrikaners, and that's spelled with a K.
These are the early Dutch.
Yeah, these are the Dutch. What was happening that the Dutch company controlled politically and economically and socially everything that was taking place in that region. So as this control continued to mount and the people felt that they wanted to get away from this control, they began to expand further into the interior of South Africa. And as they did this, they became more independent. They also decided to establish some of their own political structure, and this became the Orange Free State in the Transvaal and several other regions of Africa. But these Asian people were brought in to do the work of labor for the different plantations that were sugar plantations, other plantations. And then, of course, you had a great deal more people that were coming in as immigrants because of the great abundance of diamonds and gold that was found in South Africa at a later period in time. So this made for the Asian population being there, and the colored population came as a result of the same kind of experience that the African American has experienced in the United States, whereas there was a slave master who would go down to the quarters of the slaves, and as a result of their interpersonal relationship with child,
miscegenation created a whole different class of persons.
And the same way that the institutions like FISC and other institutions were developed in order to take care of that group, South Africa has done a similar thing by placing these colored, if you will, into another class stratification that is not too much better than what the African people are experiencing there, but just a little bit better.
Now, we've got about 2 minutes in this segment of the program, Mr. Turner, and what I'd like for you to do is to give us some idea as to the status of activism, anti-apartheid activism, especially throughout Tennessee and perhaps throughout the United States at this time.
Well, I think that there still needs to be a great deal of education done throughout the country about what's happening in South Africa and about the region, the Southern African region, because you can't talk about South Africa without talking about Namibia, some people call it Southwest Africa, talking about Angola or Botswana, or Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, which are the borderline states. And with the limited time, I can only say that there are people and organizations who are constantly providing this educational background for people to find out what role the United States is playing in the efforts to support the apartheid government, and what other countries outside of the United States are doing or in order to see that the apartheid regime is defeated.
Very good. Let me thank you for coming by and talking with us about this very, very important topic today. And we'll be back with you following this commercial break.